First Light Venison is pleased to introduce the next speaker, iconic Hawke's Bay and meat industry stalwart, Andy Lowe. So many of us, most in the room, will know Andy for his role as director of Lowe Corp, a family-owned business involved in hides, pelts and rendering materials. But what you may not be aware of is Andy's passion for the outdoors and for conservation. It's with this passion today that Andy's going to talk to us, where he's creating New Zealand's largest privately owned and funded wildlife preserve on the Cape Kidnappers, straight out those windows, home to now the widest variety of native bird species living on mainland coastal New Zealand, so quite a claim. So ladies and gentlemen, as a great entree to the Environmental Awards this evening, I introduce you Andy Lowe talking on the Cape Sanctuary Project. Andy.
Thanks, Stuart. Then the next one. Well, while we get going, I'm probably talking the wrong subject here. Being a deer thing and being one of the biggest marketers of deer skins and rendering material for high value pet food, we should be talking on that. But I'm probably quite lucky I'm not talking on pelts or deer skins the way the price has gone in the last year. So, thank you. I'm here to talk about Cape Sanctuary. Like Blake, I'm not a greenie, but I'm a great believer that sustainability is environmental, social, and economic. And when I say economic, you're not going to get farmers buying into sustainability if they're going to lose production or dollars through being sustainable. What I hope to, at the end of the day, is everyone will walk out of this room understanding that the dream of New Zealand being pest-free is real, it's achievable, it'll need science and technology and the will of urban and rural New Zealand working together. So that's what I hope to get through. I'm going to start off by explaining Cape Sanctuary, and then I'm going to go on to talk about a bigger project we just started, which is vermin control over 26,000 hectares. And this is all on farmland. So this isn't dockland. These projects are on private farmland. So when we started, it was all about what is sustainability. And what we came up with a few years ago was, 10 years ago, I think this project started 15 years ago, was sustainability to us is where endangered species can coexist with human habitation, recreation and food production. And the reason we put all those into the mix is, if you want to get buy-in from everyone, you can't go to a deer stalker and say, hey, sustainability is no deer, you can't hunt. You can't go to a farmer and say sustainability means you're going to drop your production. And you can't go to the greenie and say sustainability means you can't have your endangered species, which there's 270 species which will become endangered, which will become extinct in New Zealand without human intervention. That's now. And a lot of those are iconic species and other ones we hear about. Cape Sanctuary is over 3 farms. It's a peninsula out there, you can't see it now, but if you look out the window tomorrow, it's the whole peninsula. So it's a cross-section of New Zealand. We have sheep farming on it. We have beef farming. We have cropping. There's recreation. Ocean Beach is known as one of the iconic beaches. We have the Gannets, which we have tourism. We have Julian Robinson's got his golf course there and one of the top lodges in the world. It's actually one of the top 50 new golf courses in the world. So we have a real cross-section. With the technology that was around when we started 10 years ago, there wasn't the technology for vermin control to introduce the species we need to back into the farmland. So what you're seeing now is probably an overkill to what you'd do now. But back then, Karori had just built its vermin-proof fence in Wellington. So we thought the only way we can go with the technology we've got now is to build a vermin-proof fence across 2,500 hectares. It goes from one side to the other. Now, in 30 years, if I've just got to rely on that vermin-proof fence, I've failed. So that's a... What have we done? And this is probably an overkill now for today with the technology we've got. But to get the project going, we started with 3,000 bait stations for rats. 1,200 traps for ferrets, stoats and weasels. And this is with the technology we knew then. And this is all about, and this is just one big scientific experiment, because this had never happened before. We were putting the endangered species back into farmland. This farmland is no different than anyone's farmer's land in here. So we had to, it's all about finding where the break points are when we put each species in and what will survive with what number of predators. The interesting thing was that cats that we didn't even know existed out there, since 2007 to 2014, we got 1,251 cats. You look at the ferrets, which everyone says is ferrets, stoats and weasels, that everyone talks about as being the worst thing for our environment and our endangered species, virtually non-existent. We're lucky with hedgehogs now virtually extinct in the sanctuary. Opossums, the regional council has done a big possum control before we went through, and we're possum free. Rats and rabbits, that's not quite right because we've done a 1080 drop there and a pindone, and we've done experiments with different poisons, so that they're not included in these figures. But I think the thing which got everyone was cats, and especially in Hawke's Bay, toxoplasmosis is a big issue with sheep aborting. So on the back of this is a whole lot of, what we hope to get is a whole lot of scientific research on if we get the cat numbers down to what, how can we help economic benefit with toxoplasmosis and things like that as well. We also said, well, what part of the landscape should we be protecting and preserving? What has no farming value at all? So you've got things like the dune systems. They've been fenced off and saved. They were stocked for years, and the weeds have been taken out and planted endangered plants back in there which were extinct on mainland New Zealand, pine trees, so we've done that as well. Also in there's 190, so in this 2,500 hectares, there's only 190 hectares of native forest, which is Kānuka, and some gullies. There's virtually 900 acres of pine trees, and the rest is farmland. So it's a typical farm. So what have we introduced? The first one introduced was the North Island robin. And these things have virtually been extinct from this area for over 100 years. Then we introduced the tomtit, the rifleman. The rifleman's an interesting bird. There were 4 species of rifleman. 3 are extinct, and that's the last remaining one in New Zealand. And they're so small, they're the weight of a tea bag, dry tea bag. So but these things are all flourishing. There's flocks. The robin has even made it to Havelock North. So they're using the pathways and getting out. And I'll go later on to the next, but what's happening is with the vermin outside the fence, the survival rate's not very good. But I'll talk about that after this. Kiwi. Got kiwi out there. You go out there at night and you can hear the kiwi calling all over the property. Brown teal, New Zealand's most endangered duck. 4th rarest duck in the world, and we've probably got up to 10% of the world's population out the Cape and surrounding farmland on the dams. So, seabird site. We've got the biggest project on reintroducing seabirds to mainland New Zealand. There were millions and millions and millions of seabirds throughout New Zealand. The fertilisation of New Zealand has basically been from millions of seabirds coming ashore, feeding their young, dropping their droppings from the sea and fertilising the land. So we decided to, and most seabirds are extinct from mainland New Zealand. There's only a couple of species which are still in mainland New Zealand. One's like in Kaikoura, the Hutton Shearwater, which is up in the top of the mountains where it was too cold for ferrets and stoats to get to. So we've been really focusing on research on seabirds. If you look here, this photo is not quite the same, but this is what it was like before we started planting trees 5 years ago or 6 years ago, which is before we started. So it's amazing, even on the rugged coastline and arid Hawke's Bay where there's not much rain, if you plant your trees right, they'll grow. These are the birds we've looked at. The grey-faced petrel, which is the TD, the mutton bird, is the southern one. That's the northern one. The Cook's petrel is only on 2 offshore islands, so it's important we bring them back, and diving, they're quite common. But all these are scientific programs. So what we've got is we've got scientists, we're doing feeding regimes, we're doing, we're trying to work out how we transfer these birds back to mainland New Zealand, and what the feeding regimes are. And these are long projects. These birds take 7 years to come back. So we've transferred 900 altogether, and we had a first, it was a diver actually fledged last year and fly away, and we've got 6 burrows being occupied this year. And so it's a slow process, but they live until about 70 years old, so they're long-lived. And it's a real community project, and I'll get into it later on. So this is a real urban-rural connect. It's what I think the farming industry needs. We need to get urban people out into the rural environment so they can actually understand how farming works, what we're doing, and we've got to stop this bickering over the boundary where the urban New Zealand keeps chucking shit over the fence at the rural New Zealand. Rural New Zealand's the economic engine, and we've got to start understanding each other. And it's projects like this which connect rural with the urban, and it doesn't matter, Maori Pākehā farmers, workers, people on the dole, retired, young, all come together and help with these projects. It's just a fluffy little, that's what they look like when we pick them off the offshore islands. And I don't want to get into detail, but these things lose a third of their body weight in 3 weeks because they produce pure feathers. Feathers are pure protein, so it takes so much energy. So, tuatara, we've got 60 tuatara out there, and so I'll rip through this. This is one of my favourites, the old takahe. Never, you know, the story about the takahe is they got discovered in 1947 by Orville in the Murchison Mountains. Ever since then, they've been breeding them up, spending millions of dollars, putting them back to the Murchison Mountains. They've been munched. So there was less 3 or 4 years around of takahe than what there was when they found them in 1947, with the millions and millions of dollars been spent. So they decided to start working with private-public partnerships to get them going. So what happened here was we got a young female, 18 months old, not meant to breed until she's 4 years old or close to 4 years old. Within 6 months, this is picked up on one of those cameras. We've got mum and dad with a chick. So I put that down to, if you try to breed up on top of Mount Cook, you probably wouldn't do too well either. But you come down to Hawke's Bay where there's heaps of feed and it's warm and you can take whatever you want to do. So we're learning a lot as we go. You know, it's real interesting stuff. This is one of my favourite, kakariki. People don't realise we've got three species of our little parrot, and they're in danger. Now we've got these. We've introduced these back out there. We've got breeders breeding them. Mount Bruce breeds them for us. We've got breeders around here breeding with dock licences. We soft release them out there, and these things are coming to Havelock now, and they're going all over the place. There's no fruit farmers in here, is there? I'll be dead and gone when there's enough to start terrorising the apple orchards, but anyway, I'm sure there'll be some technology by then to keep them away. Kaka, also a rare sight for here. You know, these things are, we bred 5 last year in a captive breeding program. We released them. We've got another 3 coming to release in the next few weeks. So we'll have our own kaka population here in Hawke's Bay. This is one of the saddleback was a failure for us. They're still there, but saddleback are very susceptible to rats. We do what we call tracking tunnels to make sure rats are below 5%. Because we run a leaky system, to be vermin-free is just not practical. We can't stop people coming around the beaches. We don't want to stop recreational people. We've got farmers, we've got harvesters coming in, we've got trucks, we've got people going to golf courses. So we are going to get vermin coming in. So we've got rats, and our the detection process for rats at low numbers is still pretty hit and miss. And unfortunately, we had too many rats when we introduced these, and we had a major failure. But the reality is, they're offshore islands with no rats. So the ones which realised it was pretty advantageous to stay at the top of trees, they're still alive and breeding. So we've got a population out there now just hanging on by its teeth and starting to grow. So it's all a learning curve, but they're an amazing bird. They're only down to one island, and now with translocations like this, they're starting to get around. Self-introductions. You've got heaps of those. You always hear people talking about the New Zealand dotterel. Well, they went from one breeding pair trying to breed to, we had 19 birds a couple of years ago. Penguins with penguin boxes, oyster catchers breeding, they've tried to breed there for years. We've got things like the white-fronted tern, which have breeding colonies on rocks out there. We've got red-legged gull are actually as endangered as, and the same threatens as brown kiwi. They're breeding out there. So we've got lots of little things happening. We've got people working on things like caterpillar spiders. We've got one of the biggest caterpillar spider population out there. So it's real interesting things like the speckled skink, thought to be extinct from the area. With the vermin control, they must have been hanging on for grim death. These things have rocketed back. And this was last thing in 1975. So, you know, just with a bit of control, these endangered species, they're hanging on for grim death. And it's just real exciting stuff. We've done things like, these are our wheaters are, I think they're the biggest insect in the world. I've been told that by a few people, I might be proved wrong. And we've transferred giant wheater back there, and now we've, like with our other things, we're trying to set up breeding programs to keep breeding them. They were down to one island, with Stevens Island left in the world. So Hawke's Bay tree wheater, yeah, didn't even know they were there. They've come back. What are we up to now? The little spotted kiwi, that got reintroduced a couple of weeks ago, and fernbird will happen later on this year. He stitchbird will happen next year. This is one here which is beyond me. There's 120 of these birds left in the world. They are going to become extinct without human intervention, and Kiwis don't know anything about them. And you know, how can we in this day and age? We talk about extinctions. We think it's back in the Ice Age or the dinosaur age, whatever age you want to do. This is happening in our lifetime. So we're building in partnership with Doc, we're building a big aviary to try and be part of the process of saving them from extinction. We don't like being a zoo, but sometimes you've got to be a zoo for some species just to save them from extinction. We do all this stuff, so a big part of it's education. If you don't educate the kids, we learn from McDonald's, advertise to the kids and the parents come along, so that's pretty well our thing. We don't muck around. We tell the kids what happens, what cats do and don't do, so we're pretty honest with people. And we've had people like Rue Kleinpaste, we've had him talk to half the schools in Hawke's Bay, so we're pretty active in that area. How does the whole thing work? It's a people, it's a team. We've got 3 staff, 3 full-time staff, we've got a couple of advisors, and it's a real partnership between iwi, DOC, which is government, regional councils, volunteers and landowners. It's like a 4-legged stool. If one of those legs fell off, the stool would fall over and we haven't got a project. So it's really about the community pulling together. We work with iwi from one end of the country to the other in the Chatham Islands, because these birds were transferring from all over the country. It's really a gift from one iwi to another. No one owns them. DOC, they've got to sign the permits off, and sometimes it's a bit painful, but we get there. But overall, they're really good. Volunteers, we've got 400 volunteers at the Cape, and they're there regularly. You've got people there every day. It's thousands and thousands of man-hours. You've got people planting trees, you've got people doing bait lines, you've got people weeding, you've got people, each of these species has got people monitoring them and looking after them and understanding them. And we've got the landowners. Without the landowners, we're on private land, this wouldn't work. So, and this is just people planting trees. All the bait boxes are built by volunteers, education, iwi, hapu to hapu throughout the country. Now, so that's Cape Century, and I'm running out of time, so I'll move quick. I just want to tell you another project. So that project's at the Cape, and to move out, our next program, we've just started a project, Cape to City, which is another community initiative, which is, in the catchphrase here, we're native species thrive where we live, work and play. So work as farmers, that brings the farmers in. And so what's this about? This is 26,000 hectares of farmland where farmers are voluntarily going to come into a program to move out from what the Cape's done. We've raised $5 million, $6 million for a 5-year project, along with Poteri, which is a sister project. The stakeholders are DOC, Regional Council, Landcare Research, ATRI Foundation, and Cape Century, which is us. Now, I just want to, ATRI Foundation, this is Julian Robertson's foundation. He's co-funded the Cape with me. We do it together, and he's one of the major funders for this next initiative. And we just need to, I think we just need to recognise people like Julian Robertson with the money they bring in, how they, you know, they do it without fanfare. What they do for this province and New Zealand with their gifts and the way they help in sustainability. Because Julian's all about sustainability as farm production. He's all about the economic, the social, as well as the environmental. So I think you read through. I'm running out of time. So what is Cape Century? There's Cape Napier. There's the vermin-proof fence coming through there. You're up here in Napier. There's Havelock North. So this is 26,000 hectares of farmland. You've got to remember, 90% of this land hasn't got a tree on it, and if it's got a tree, most of it's pine trees. And there's a bit of native bush, and there's some rivers. Now, and part of the project's water, which Blake went on, but let's just focus on the species. So this is about stage 2 of Cape Century. And this is about, and we've got 60% of farmers so far have signed up, and it's voluntary. If farmers don't want to go in it, we'll go around them. But the whole idea about this is something like the possum funding, using research, R&D and technology to use the same amount of money for possum control to also do stoats, ferrets, cats, weasels and rats in some areas. Let's start thinking wider. Let's start thinking of new ways of doing things so we can control these pests. So that's what this is about. And there's a real interesting technology coming out with wireless trapping. So if a farmer wants to get involved, he might want to check his own traps or not check it. Your long life bait, you don't have to check every trap. If a trap goes off, next time the farmer's out that area, you can clear the trap and reset it because a text has come through on his phone. So there's a whole lot of technology here, and I think someone here brought up about how do we get the government involved in R&D? The government needs to, not a hand out, a hand up to help urban, rural New Zealand get into this stuff. Because this won't just, it's not just about us. We market to the big brand houses around the world, you know, the Burberrys, the Prada, the Gucci's and whatever. They want this stuff as part of the sale, part of the story. This is what they want. They want sustainability is going to become a key issue with consumers, especially in Europe in the next few years. My 20-year vision, Cape Century is the start of a pest-free New Zealand. Cape the city with the 26,000 hectares is an extension of that. And then in 20 years' time, I don't have to build a new vermin-proof fence because I've failed. Or I shouldn't say I say we as a team because there's a whole team here working on this. And pest-free New Zealand becomes a reality for all of us. You know, we're endangered species, can thrive where we live, work and play. These things I've talked about up here, they should be on all our farms. And I think if we think about it and focus on it and have the right attitude, we'll get there. Thanks, everyone. Probably going to get a question on, yeah, don't get me anything on skins.
Is that one working?
Yeah, congratulations, Andy. What you're doing is fantastic. I just got back from 2 weeks hunting on Stewart Island, and down there the whole island is overrun with wildcats, possums and rats. The guy from Trade Me, I think, was talking about trying to fund extermination of cats and rats and possums down there. It's the size of Hawke's Bay, Stewart Island, from Wairoa to Woodville, so it's a big island. How do you think it's feasible that they could actually do that?
Personally, I don't think it's feasible with technology at the moment, but I think over time, with technology, it will become feasible. And I think the other thing we've got to be careful of here is we've got to have trapping systems where we catch the wild cats, but we can release the pet cats, because you know there's a lot of lifestyle in this area as well. So it's really finding how we do it.
But in reality, it is the cats that's doing the most damage.
The cats for us do the most, cats and rats.
Yeah, right, Andy, I'm neighbour of David and Juliet Wallace at Warrenhep in Cambridge, and they started the excluder fence and then went on to Maunga Territory, which is the only ecological island in New Zealand which is totally pest-proof. At the moment, it's 3,500 hectares. I've noticed his 26 acres was totally pest-proof for the last 17 years. What is the problem going to be with starlings? Look, starlings actually roost and almost ruining the native forest of what David and Juliet have developed over the years, and that's something maybe you have to look at in the future, is bloody starlings are going to take over from the natives in this area by getting rid of the pests.
Yeah, we have a problem with starlings, and that they we put the nest boxes up for the kakariki and the other things, and they go and inhabit them. So we're looking at hole sizes where starlings can't get in, other things can. So I think it's a technology thing again. How do we create a nest box where starlings can't get in but other things can? I think everything's achievable. We just got to find a way of doing it.
One more.
Hey, great talk. I really enjoyed it. Just a question, kind of. You talked about the open, like you just talked about the pet cat example, about the integration between the public having access and you guys keeping your, kind of your control on what's happening inside as far as pests. Can you maybe talk a bit about how you guys are managing that and how you guys are, what kind of technologies in the future you think you need to manage that better?
So manage what? It isn't.
Like the pests coming in, like kind of how you have a open door policy to the public, to your area, to this cape. How you could, like how you keep that open door policy and still manage your pest numbers inside.
Yeah. So what we've got now is we've got big trapping. So there's three entry points really. One's around the main gate into the cape, and two are at the beach ends. And at the moment we've just got big trapping areas. But there's a company. There's a foundation called Zip, which is out of the Next Foundation, and have had some money from the dairy industry, which is doing a lot of work on pest barriers through trapping and other technologies. And so, I mean, over time there's going to be new technologies come in, but at the moment we just have big trapping zones, and we accept that some pests are going to get through, so we're on a full trapping system within inside the fence.
Thank you very much, Andy.
Sure.
Oh, one more.
Yeah, Andy, inspiring talk. Thank you. Do you have any policy on either of the developments you're doing in regard poisons?
We can talk about poisons all day long. The reality is, you've got things like 1080. No one likes poisons, but until we've got something better, we've got to use it. That's my personal view. And the reality is, I suppose the thing that worries me is 1080 was developed in the late 50s, early 60s, and you'd think with technology and innovation we'd have found a new poison since then. So I think that's where government's got to give us a hand up, not a handout, to help us with these things. And I think the other thing with 1080 is, I assume you're talking about things like 1080. Everyone gives DOC a hard time, but you guys use twice as much 1080 as DOC does, so it's a real issue. And other poisons as well. There's a lot of other poisons which is worse than 1080, but 1080 is the one which gets the... So I think, we've got to use science and technology to really get past this poison stage we're at now. This is a personal view.
A round of applause for Andy, please.
Good, right? Good stuff, mate.